Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the full-length debut album from Bazzi called Cosmic. You know, I'm not going to deny how kind of weird it feels like when a record like this winds up so high on my schedule so quickly, because it's been very well documented that I was no big fan of the whole Vine dance craze that dominated entirely too much of the Hot 100 in the mid-2010s. And while there were a fair few Vine stars that found careers after the platform collapsed, some of which I actually kind of like a fair bit, like the David Dobrik Vlog Squad or Gabby Hanna, but the only one associated primarily with music that I came close to liking long-term was Shawn Mendes, and even he had some gross low points. I remember Treat You Better. But Bazzi's meteoric rise might be even stranger. He also started off on Vine, but his breakthrough of his song, Mine, it was linked to a Snapchat lens that went viral. Now, considering Snapchat is in its own dire straits right now, I couldn't help but feel kind of surprised to discover that not only did Bazzi have an album ready to go in order to capitalize on his sudden success, seemingly backed by Warner and Atlantic to boot, just keep that in mind, but it also looked like a fully fleshed out project, not an EP. 16 songs, self-produced with only an assist from the duo Rice and Peas, and getting a surprising amount of buzz to get up my schedule remarkably quickly. And considering that Mine, that was a pretty damn good song, I was at least inclined to see if this guy was truly ready for the big time, so alright, what do we get with Cosmic? So here's the thing, I feel like I'm caught between two generations even covering this debut album, because the vast majority of the mainstream outlets that lean towards an older demographic, they haven't covered this, they don't care, and the younger independent critics also seem to have either ignored this or have dismissed it pretty harshly to boot. And in a sense, I think Bazzi might feel similar. His sound calls back to a brand of pop and R&B that was more reminiscent of the early to mid 2000s, with a gentle modern trap update in some of the production, and it all blew up off of a Snapchat lens of all things. And while mimetic overexposure might be the reason so many younger people have turned against him, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be part of that crowd, because against all my doubts, I actually enjoyed Cosmic a fair bit. Yeah, that might be surprising to a fair bit of people, but while it certainly is flawed, and we'll get into why, I will make the argument for what this is. It mostly works if you actually give it a chance, and honestly, it's not bad at all. And we're going to have to start with Bazzi himself here, and a vocal comparison that probably will not help my case, early Chris Brown. And look, it's more in his vocal timbre than his presentation. He certainly doesn't have that nasal mugging quality that Chris Brown could never convincingly back up. But you know what? I certainly hear what many people could find appealing in that vocal tone, with maybe a dash of The Weeknd's cadence and Jason Derulo's pop sensibility. And while that does mean his range can feel a tad bit limited, even in the falsetto, and the autotune creeps in more often than I would personally prefer, like with Tinashe, Bazzi gets a lot of work out of some pretty well-arranged and layered vocal harmonies that I like a lot, eschewing pitch shifting for a richer vocal pickup that only serves to amplify his presence on these songs. But unlike Tinashe, however, Bazzi's production gives him the space, the shimmering atmosphere to amplify his presence and give many of these songs a certain melodic swell you would not expect without a much larger production team, hell, a much larger production budget. And sure, on a few songs like Honest, there can be judicious use of reverb, but more often than not, there's a little bit more poise and care in crafting some more elegant arrangements. From the chimes on Mine to what sounds like a fluttering harp on Beautiful, from the elegant synth layering on Gone to the cooing vocal samples and pianos behind Fantasy. Now, you could also make the argument that it might seem even a little bit too well produced, a little bit too well assembled, but to Bazzi's credit, there's more texture and subtlety and personality to many of these arrangements than you would otherwise expect. From a rougher piano pickup on Mirror that builds some great bounce to it, to the tight thrumming low-end groove of 315, from the heavy bass groove of Honest to even the sharper bass line on Myself, that with its keyboard choices reminded me a lot of early to mid 2000s R&B Restraint, and it's a good look for him. Now, if I were to nitpick the production, it would probably come in some of the inconsistent percussion choices. Yeah, many of the fizzier snares and hi-hat choices, they blend fine enough against the more muted synth tones, and the bass beats, they sound alright, but some of the skittering scratches or accent choices can help it feel a little bit flat or inadequately blended or almost cheap at spots, like on the opener Dreams or the clicking of Star. It just got distracting for me, especially when so much of the rest of the mix sounds really good. And on top of that, while I could make out some of the guitar blended well into the mix, the moments that just cut back to acoustic guitar for contrast can't help but kind of underwhelm me. But that leads to what will probably be the most controversial thing about Cosmic, the song length. Now, as I said in the past, if you can fully encapsulate a great melody or a song idea within a tight framework, the time spent on it becomes less of a factor. But part of this is also conditional upon your tonal choice, which leads to this weird dichotomy of this album. For as richly melodic as so many of these songs are, as much as they want to soar and sparkle, but not a single song on this album is longer than exactly 3 minutes. And while I do respect some brevity, don't get me wrong, you gotta wonder how much more the production and the songwriting could have evolved to make use of just a little bit more space. You didn't have to cut everything so short. Hell, with as many tracks that end abruptly, you get the impression that some songs could have easily used more room to breathe and swell just a few more measures or bars. And this leads to a larger question of scope and intimacy. With his broader vocal choice and a lot of his delivery, you would think that Bazzi could use more time in order to flesh out these pieces, give them a little bit greater gravitas. But with how short so many of them are, you get the impression that he was trying to capture more intimate snapshots. Two distinctive stylistic choices in terms of production and delivery that don't always go together. And a big part of actually sticking the landing and the unanswered question of that, it lands in the songwriting and the lyrics, where again, it's important to stress that given the short track lengths, we rarely get the sort of detail and texture to really flesh out much of a scene, so every word counts that much more. And yet the details we do get, well, if Bazzi has any serious shortcomings in this debut, it would be the writing that would help him stand out. Because his songs, they really fall into one of 3 molds. Opulent, half-faded sex jams full of cigars and Hennessy and brand names that can be genuinely pretty but are kind of vacant, a little shallow. Then you get the more earnest love songs that feel a little bit more grounded and tend to hit harder for me, such as Mine and Soarin and BRB and 315. And then finally you get moments of darker introspection, where it's a shade too earnest to feel all that manipulative, but not quite self-aware enough to back up any trace of nuance. At best, you get songs like Mirror. It's a pretty straightforward confrontation with his own bad tendencies and desire to change, probably one of the better cuts on the album. Or even something like Honest, where he can incredibly sell the melancholy at his girl betraying him for his best friend, and how even if the answer wouldn't have been great for him in the end, he would just appreciate the truth, and I can respect that. It's a little bit more mature. And I'll admit why it actually worked for me a lot more than I thought it would. By all his admissions, he was a huge asshole in this relationship, likely the reason of the breakup, but she's still very much in love with him. And while a song like this could easily be seen as self-serving, through his delivery, he's more just bemused and just wanting her to move on. Now, if you want songs that feel self-serving and kind of obnoxious, look at Changed, which definitely treads into emotionally manipulative territory and playing the blame game with its passive-aggressive posturing. And while you see hints of similar behavior on Cartier and Somebody, even with the framing that doesn't really imply he's in the right, he doesn't really have the space or charisma or complexity to really earn it effectively, and that is a problem. But at the end of the day, alright, look, let's not deny what this album is. Bazzi, he's a good performer. He knows his way around some catchy melodies, hooks, and credible production. But many of these ideas that he presents here are kind of undercooked, a little bit shallow, or lacking more distinctive character to really separate him from his contemporaries and his influences. I mean, I'd probably listen to him over Chris Brown. If you're looking for pop R&B in that lane, I'd argue that Bazzi delivers. But it's also one of those projects where you find yourself wishing for a little bit more meat to the bones, a little more development, or maybe a song longer than 3 minutes that can actually earn some of those grander, broader strokes. And yet, even with all that, I think this is a good album, but I would acknowledge what needs to improve here, and in that vein, I'm giving this a very strong 6 out of 10 and a recommendation. But hey, I can definitely think if Bazzi can sustain his momentum and develop his compositions a little further, add a little bit more meat here, he's got the talent and potential to make something that is truly great. And in the meantime, yeah, if you overlook this, it's definitely worth a quick listen. Doesn't take that long. Check it out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I'm a little surprised I'm as positive on this as I am, but hey, if you want to buy it, links down there below. And I got the poll up there. I'm curious where people fall on this. I don't think this is going to be having one record that'll have a clear critical consensus. So there, have fun. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process, the link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. Just keep in mind, I've changed the schedule up a little bit. It would be from per video to per month, so that opens up some new opportunities for people who want to get on board. And if you want to see my schedule, it's on my Instagram, link down there below. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.